As a dungeon master, I hate to give up my control over the story, but it was very clear to me that I wanted my players to be fully engaged on the development of our campaign plot. Tough spot, but I found a way to make that work through a simple and direct approach. But how to co-create characters' backstories and campaign plots? I think that a good way to answer that is with a practical example for one of my recent campaigns. This time, our group had been playing together for quite some months. The former DM had changed jobs, would have less available time, and wanted to become a player. So I offered myself to be a DM as long as we could all work together on the campaign on a session 0. Even before that, we agreed on some guidelines. We would play a homebrew high fantasy campaign in the Forgotten Realms. We were all feeling like playing something adventurous and epic with some comic relief, but not goofy. We wanted something with an Indiana Jones feeling. I was going to work on plot ideas and asked all players to work on character sketches so that we could pitch them to one another during our session 0. So I pictured a campaign that would feel like a road movie, where the locations would be as important to the story as the characters. I wanted it to be fast-paced, but at the same time intriguing and mysterious. I also wanted to bring mythical creatures as the main antagonists, such as mummies and minotaurs and medusas. And everyone immediately bought into that idea. Then they presented their character ideas to me. One of them was an archaeologist wizard, clearly inspired in Dr. Aphra from the Star Wars comics, an ex-convict shadow monk, a death cleric, and an indebted pirate rogue. All of them had their own peaks and twists, and we got really excited, but then when we considered all of them together, we looked at each other and thought, oh, this starting point could take us to a point that we had already experienced before. Characters and adventures too unrelated for us to have tight, exciting game sessions. How could we make that work? Well, that's what the session 0 is for. So we took a deep breath and started to sort it out. I was confident that discussing as a group, one idea would spark another, allowing us to expand, adapt, and select the best of them. And that's exactly what happened. We worked our initial pitches to make them grow, expand, and converge into a single story that came out more or less like that. The Shadow Monk received news that his old master had been turned into stone in an expedition to an underground ruin. He asked some questions in the criminal world and found out that an archaeologist wizard might know the possible causes and cures for that. His investigation also attracted the attention of a death cleric who had a lead. A death knight, responsible for murdering his family, was raiding ancient tombs in search of magical objects for his collection. He knew the death knight was in possession of the elixir of the Medusa, which could save the Shadow Monk's old master. He also knew what could be the death knight's next targets, but all of them were scattered along the sea of fallen stars. Lucky for them, the archaeologist wizard knew a rogue pirate in need of coin who would be willing to take the party around in her ship. Thus, a daring journey started, taking the 4 of them to mysterious ruins filled with mythical creatures and treasures and archaeological rarities as they sought for the cure for putrefaction and tried to thwart the actions of the Death Knight. I went back home super stoked to write the first adventure and prepare the first session. The players went home stoked to build the characters that they had drafted together in that session. What could have been a low-energy, dispersed campaign start turned out quite the opposite. An exciting story starring larger-than-life characters with colorful personalities. And you know what I like the best about that? We were all playing the very game and the very characters that we originally wanted to play. See how a proper session 0 can change the course of your campaign? Have you ever tried to run a similar session 0, or do you still think it's a waste of time.